is the only one, La ilaha illa huwa, and trusting Him completely. What does that mean? When you obey me, trust me, I will be on your side. When you obey me completely, trust me, I am the only one who can see you through your problems. What you have in your head is as the solution is not the solution. What I'm giving you, Allah is telling us, that's the solution. Learn to trust me. And those who believe, okay, fine, you have faith in Allah, that it came from Allah, yes. The problem came from Allah is only half the faith. The only one who can get me out of this problem is Allah, is the other half. And the only way He'll get me out of it is if I continue to obey Allah and obey the Messenger, or if I choose now, even if I've been in disobedience, I migrate to obeying Allah and obeying the Messenger, then He's going to get me out of my problem. You know, it could be somebody has a job where they're making, it's a difficult economy right now, right? It's hard to get jobs, but somebody found a job. And then they figure out that the job isn't exactly halal. And or maybe they realize that even during the interview process, this isn't exactly halal. But then they're like, well, okay, maybe it's haram, but well, just a temporary haram. By next Ramadan, I'll be out of it. Right? So they tell themselves whatever, and they just get the job. At least it's paying the bills. And now, when they are in that situation, they put themselves in that situation, their conscience keeps poking at them. And maybe they start seeing new problems in their life they never saw before. Because there's no blessings in the money that's being earned. When the money being earned is coming from a haram source, it's coming from a source Allah doesn't bless, then the food you buy from it, the groceries you get from it, the rent you pay from it with it, right? For the apartment, that apartment has more fights in it than peace. That food gives you more indigestion than nutrition. Nothing has blessings in it. Things are going wrong all the time. You start seeing, you have to take a step back and say, what am I doing wrong that blessings have been removed? Allah doesn't punish people. But there's natural law, there's spiritual law. Naturally, when you eat poison, your body gets poisoned. When you consume what is spiritually poisonous, your life gets poisoned. That's just what happens. So you have to ask yourself, what am I doing? Whose right did I take? What did I not do? Maybe somebody just decided not to give zakat, even though they should be giving zakat. Or maybe somebody owed to pay back and they can pay the loan back and they still didn't pay it back. They did something wrong with money. And we think we can get other things with that money and our life will be better. Whatever things you get is not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. So at that point, you and I have to realize maybe this money is better to let go. Maybe I need to come back. I actually certainly need to come back to obeying Allah and obeying the Messenger, and this problem will disappear. And then people will come and say to you, but where? How are you going to pay the bills? How are you going to do this? What are you going to do that? Okay, I get it. Obey Allah and the Messenger, but come on, get realistic. And Allah says, yes, trust yourself, trust what people say, but more than anything else, trust Allah. وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ اللَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Now the ayah I was going to tell you about. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن من أزواجكم وأولادكم عدوا لكم. Those of you who have faith, there's no doubt about it. From among your spouses and your children, there are enemies for you. What? Did I just say that? From among your spouses and your children, there are enemies for you, is the next ayah. Believers, listen up. This is in Medina. The Prophet ﷺ is in Medina. There are people that are sitting in the audience that have fought the enemy in Makkah. And they fought them in the battle of Badr. They fought them in the battle of Uhud. And now an ayah comes, they're sitting and the Rasul ﷺ is reciting this ayah to them. And among your spouses and your children, there are enemies. And they're the enemy? Are the enemies on the battlefield? They're the ones who are putting idols at the Kaaba. They're the ones who do shirk with Allah. They're the ones who tried to kill Allah's messenger. How can my wife and my children be my enemy? He didn't say all of them. He said among them are those that are enemies for you. So he didn't say all of you have families in which there's animosity, but some of you are harboring enemies. And azwaj actually can be used for husbands and wives. So it's a bad translation to say, oh, believers, your wives and children are enemies. Or some of your wives and children are enemies. No, some of your husbands are enemies too. And your children are enemies too. So how are they enemies? When you cross Allah's lines because you hate someone, right? When you cross Allah's lines because you hate someone out of animosity, that's not acceptable. But when you disobey Allah and disobey the Messenger or trust those that you love more than you trust Allah and you trust the Messenger, when you want to make your spouse and your children happy while you are okay with making Allah what? Unhappy. When you put them in a place that only belongs to Allah, when absolute obedience starts going to the spouse and the child, even at the expense of obedience to Allah, then even though you love them and they love you, and you hug them and they hug you, and you eat with them and they eat with you, even though you live your lives together, you're living under the same roof. You protect them, they protect you, they become enemies. Physically, no. Nobody's trying to kill nobody. This is not an ayah about when you go home, make sure there's no dagger under the pillow. It's not that. That's not what this ayah is about. This ayah is about spiritual animosity. What's the treasure that Allah gave in this ayah? Faith, in these ayat. Faith, reliance on Allah. When you create an environment in the family where obedience to Allah, reliance on Allah, dealing with a crisis and turning back to Allah, those things are being pulled away. They're being pulled away, and they're being pulled away by spouse or child. Then they are becoming a kind of enemy. Well, if they're an enemy, then we should fight them. Because the rest of the ayah should be, well, if they are your enemy, now that you know that they're your enemy, sharpen your swords. Or get away from them at least. Because they're, they're the enemy. What does Allah say? Inna min azwajikum wa uladikum aduwwan lakum fahdharuhum. Then be careful of them. Watch out for them. Wa in ta'fu wa tasfahu wa taghfiru fa inna Allaha ghafurur rahim. And if you do in fact lovingly forgive, overlook, tasfahu. Tasfahu safaha means to turn the page, meaning they messed up or they said something outrageous, even outrageous that takes you away from your faith. And they said those kinds of things, but you're able to turn the page. Now this is already really getting really hard. So there's a family that even Allah declares can be like an enemy or be an enemy. And then Allah says to you and me, if you can pardon and if you can turn the page, and then what taghfiru, and you can cover up for them. So there's 3 words for forgiveness being used in one ayah. There's no ayah like in the Quran like that, where multiple words for one act, which is forgiveness, is being used over and over again. Because when Allah says lovingly pardon, ta'fu, it's a word for forgiveness at the end. Tasfahu, turn the page, let it go, bury the hatchet, whatever phrases people use. Punjabi people say mitti pao te khulle khao, right? That's what they say. Just, put dirt on it, So there are different expressions for it. Just let it go, move on, right? Which is again forgiveness, isn't it? And then he says, وَتَغْفِرُوا, and that's maghfirah is the common word for forgiveness. Actually, literally means to cover it up. Turn the page, cover it up, as if there was nothing turned either. Now the whole thing, the imagery of turning the page means you can't see what's on the previous page, which means the kind of forgiveness where you don't bring it up. Remember in 1997 when I forgave you? You already turned the page. You already turned the page. But the ayah has this remarkable contrast. It started with some people in your family, your spouses and your children and your enemies. Watch out for them. Okay, I'm on guard. And then he says, and if you can lovingly pardon and turn the page and forgive, cover up for them, cover for them too. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Then certainly Allah is extremely forgiving, always loving and caring. How do we understand this? How do we make sense of this ayah? Because it's giving us 2 very different pictures. And they're going in 2 very different directions. Being careful of an enemy is not lovingly forgiving an enemy. Those are 2 different things. You don't know if they're carrying a sword behind their hand and you come and give them a hug and that's the last thing you ever do. So how do you reconcile? And I was going to go through the whole rest of the surah, but maybe inshallah next khutbah. But I'll tell you at least this much for now. Our families can be the most massive trial. They can be the most difficult trial. It can come from any direction. And it can be a trial from the people you love the most. They don't even have to be abusive to you for them to be a trial for you. But even if they are abusive, you know the difference between someone who lost their cool or who made a mistake once or at a certain event or at a certain moment, but that's not their nature. You know who they really are. And what anger does is anger wants us to look at someone and remember their worst moment, and that's all you remember about them. Like your picture of them is how you think of that person, that spouse of yours or that child of yours, is the worst thing they ever did. That's the picture in your head. By the way, there's another delusional side too. When people are so in love, they overlook all the horrible and they only see the good. The one good thing that happened in 1983, they remember, and that's the picture in their head. And this person can get away with murder after that, and that's all they see, right? Allah Azza wa Jalla is first telling us, when someone is bad to you, recognize it. When someone's not okay, not doing right by you, then you should know. You should be careful. So the eye open, not delusional, the eyes open reality. Is this person really abusive? Was that a one-time thing? Is this a serial habit? Is that just in their nature to be this way? Is that just something they keep on doing over and over again for years and years and years? If that's the case, be careful. But now here's the thing, here's the part. When that person changes, because change is possible. Every human being can change. And if that person changes and you're smart enough to know that it's not an artificial change, because artificial change means, I'm so sorry, I'm never going to do it again, I feel really bad. And you're like, okay, yes, I forgive you. Allah says I forgive you. Allah says to forgive, so I forgive you. And then 2 weeks later, they're exactly in the same place again. No sorry at all. Right? And they're even worse offenders than before. Then you know that there's a serial habit of telling you what you need to hear to get you to put your guard down. But if you're careful, the word فَاحْذَرُوهُمْ is pivotal here. If you're watchful, then you know where people stand. Then you have a pretty good gauge. And when you genuinely do see someone make a change, when you genuinely do see someone is remorseful and they've changed their ways, then it's okay to let go of that image of them as a vengeful person or an evil person or someone who did a lot of evil or bad. It's okay to let that go. And it's okay if they're asking for forgiveness, that you can pardon them, that you can turn the page. This is not about people who curse you and then you say, well, Allah says forgive, so I'm going to forgive. I didn't ask for your forgiveness, yeah, but I'm obeying Allah. No, you don't forgive someone who doesn't want forgiveness. You don't turn the page for someone who's burning the book. That's not what this is. This cannot be put to misuse. Allah is not asking us to be passive and people can walk all over you, whether even their family, and you just forgive. No. But if they want to make serious reconciliation, they want to make things right, and you still feel that there is room to make things right, even though they've been really bad, so bad that even Allah called them enemy. But you genuinely see that they've made a change, then if you pardon and forgive and don't bring it up again, because Allah has put that behind them. Allah says, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, then certainly Allah is forgiving. If Allah can forgive that, and if Allah can forgive sincere tawbah, then maybe I can make room in it too. The last thing I share with you before I let you guys go about this ayah, not the rest of the surah, just this ayah, is don't misunderstand. Allah didn't command you and me to forgive in this ayah. It's so amazing. They are enemies for you, watch out for them. That was actually an instruction, watch out for them. That was advice. Watch out for them. And then he said, if you forgive in 3 different ways, then Allah is forgiving too. You know what that means? If you take that choice, that you decide to forgive them, it's a choice you have. And it may be a very hard choice, but if you make that choice sensibly, even though it's extremely difficult to make that choice, then Allah recognizes that you have done something amazing, and maybe Allah will reward you with ultimate forgiveness. Maybe that'll be your reward. You won't be punished for not forgiving, but you may be greatly rewarded for forgiving and for making things right. وَإِن تَعْفُوا وَتَصْفَحُوا وَتَغْفِرُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So it's this, the balance between those two has been struck. And where did I start this khutbah today? No difficulty strikes you except by Allah's permission. No calamity strikes you, right? And a few ayat later, Allah could have talked about any kind of calamity. He could have talked about sickness or death, or he could talked about war. He could have talked about any kind of major trial, but he decided that in this remarkable surah, Surah Al-Taghabun, that he will articulate to us a trial like no other trial. The trial that comes from loved ones. The trial that comes from spouses and children. It's a very difficult trial. Even Allah recognizes things can get so bad that they become an enemy. But even then, Allah says there may be a way back. There may be a way back. He doesn't guarantee there's a way back, because you have to have the sense to know whether there's a way back or not. Right? You have to decide that yourself. And how will you know? The questions that somebody might ask by the time they get to, how do you know that they're not really an enemy? How do you know that there is a way back? How do you know that forgiveness is going to work out? Well, here's a hint. وَمَنْ يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. A couple of ayat ago, whatever calamity strikes, what should you do if you don't know what to do? Restore your faith in Allah. Allah will guide your heart. If your heart is constantly consumed with anger and memories of what went wrong, and the need for justice and somehow delivering pain, where's your iman? Then your heart isn't busy with Allah, it's busy with this person. And it's never going to solve anything. Take your heart back to Allah, and maybe the guidance from Allah will be you need to leave. Maybe the guidance from Allah will be here's how you need to make reconciliation. I don't know. That's coming from Allah. Yahdi qalbahu. Wallahu bi kulli shay'in alim. Allah is the one who knows everything. So it's an incredibly cohesive. This is what I wanted to show you, right? Sometimes you look at one ayah and you get something, but when you look at the